The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the usual self-importance that comes from governing 3,000 civilizations who mostly wished you'd mind your own business. Today's agenda featured humanity's first transmission, which had arrived with all the fanfare of a galactic fart in a spacesuit. Commander Vex Tal, whose military decorations weighed more than most species' entire armies, leaned back in his crystalline throne and snorted. Primitive meat bags broadcasting radio waves like they invented fire yesterday. Look at this pathetic signal strength. My personal shuttle has more processing power than their entire planet. The transmission crackled through the chamber's speakers. Hello, universe. This is Earth calling. We come in peace, we have pizza, and we're really hoping you're not the kind of aliens who probe things. Ambassador Krill Nock, whose anxiety levels could power a small moon, wrung his 6 hands nervously. Perhaps we should follow Protocol 7-4-17, subsection C, regarding primitive species integration. The paperwork alone would take several standard cycles, which gives us time for proper cultural assessment and— "Oh, shut up, Krill," interrupted Dr. Keith Ran, the Council's chief xenobiologist and part-time species snob. She adjusted her 17 pairs of spectacles and consulted her datapad. "I've analyzed their biological limitations. Bipedal carbon-based life forms with laughably short lifespans, single heart, primitive respiratory system, and brains so small they probably forget to breathe without conscious effort. They're barely evolved past throwing rocks at predators." Commander Vex Tal's mandibles clicked with amusement. "Then we follow standard procedure. Send the welcome wagon." The welcome wagon, for those unfamiliar with Galactic Council diplomacy, consisted of 200 fully armed warships designed to convince new species that joining the galactic community was absolutely voluntary. But resistance would result in becoming a small crater with delusions of sovereignty. 200 ships seems excessive for such a primitive species, Krill Nock ventured, his voice reaching frequencies that made nearby crystals hum sympathetically. "Nonsense," Vex Tal declared, polishing one of his ceremonial laser cannons. "It's a gentle introduction. We're practically being charitable. Most species get the full subjugation experience with orbital bombardment and complementary devastation. These humans should be grateful we're using our indoor voices." Dr. Keith Ran nodded sagely. "My analysis indicates they'll surrender immediately upon seeing our technological superiority. Humans appear to be natural cowards who've never faced real adversity. Their entertainment media suggests they spend most of their time consuming fermented plant matter and watching other humans chase balls around. What none of them mentioned, because none of them had bothered to research it, was that human entertainment media also included approximately 17,000 movies about humans blowing things up, 43,000 books about humans fighting impossible odds, and an entire genre dedicated to humans being so stubborn they'd rather die than admit they were wrong. But hey, details. Captain Jake Morrison was having what he generously called a Tuesday, which meant everything was broken, the coffee was cold, and somewhere in the universe, Murphy's Law was probably having a good laugh at his expense. Then the aliens showed up, and Tuesday officially became the worst day in human history. "Captain," called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the fleet that just appeared in our solar system. And when I say fleet, I mean enough ships to block out the sun. If the sun were the size of Jupiter and Jupiter, we're having a really bad day." Jake sipped his cold coffee and stared at the tactical display. 200 alien warships arranged in what could only be described as a surrender now, or we'll redecorate your planet with laser fire formation. Well, that's not ominous at all. Put them through. The transmission came through with crystal clarity, which was humanity's first hint that these aliens had technology that made their best equipment look like stone tools with delusions of grandeur. "Greetings, primitive species of the third planet. I am Fleet Commander Yix Nal of the Galactic Council Expeditionary Force. Your planet has been selected for integration into the galactic community. You will cease all military activities, surrender your governmental systems, and prepare for processing. Resistance is futile, illogical, and frankly beneath our notice. You have 30 of your local time units to comply." Jake took another sip of coffee and considered his response options. He could surrender gracefully, thereby ensuring humanity's survival as a client species. He could attempt negotiation, possibly buying time for Earth's governments to coordinate a response. Or he could do what every human military officer had been secretly hoping to do since the day they joined up: tell a bunch of pompous aliens exactly where they could shove their ultimatum. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. Here's our counteroffer. Take your fleet, point it toward the nearest black hole, and accelerate until you achieve a meaningful relationship with gravity. And if you're having trouble understanding that, let me translate it into a language you might comprehend. Jake stood up, walked to the main view screen, and extended his middle finger with the kind of conviction usually reserved for religious experiences. The alien fleet's response was immediate and predictable. Energy weapons began charging, and the lead ships moved into attack formation. That's when Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez chose to make her entrance, carrying a coffee mug that read "World's Most Caffeinated Problem Solver," and wearing the expression of someone who'd just realized the universe was about to become her personal stress test. "Captain," she said, settling into her station with the practiced ease of someone who'd fixed impossible problems before breakfast. "I've been monitoring their energy signatures. The good news is their weapons are only about 3 times more powerful than ours. The bad news is they have 200 ships and we have 12. Jake grinned. "Rosa, you beautiful genius, please tell me you've got one of your patented solutions that involves making things explode in ways that defy several laws of physics." Rosa's return grin could have powered a small city. "Sir, Nate, have you ever wondered what would happen if we jury-rigged our mining charges to our missile delivery systems and channel, then somehow convinced the laws of thermodynamics to take a coffee break?" The alien fleet had just discovered something the Galactic Council's files had failed to mention. Humans had a species-wide obsession with building things that exploded, and they'd spent several thousand years perfecting the art of creative destruction. Their intel, it seemed, had been slightly off. The first rule of civilized space combat, according to the Galactic Council's Military Ethics Handbook, was that warfare should be conducted with honor, dignity, and a reasonable respect for property values. The second rule was that civilian targets were off limits, infrastructure should be preserved when possible, and unnecessary destruction was considered poor form. Humanity, as it turned out, had never read the handbook. Captain Morrison's opening salvo consisted of 12 missiles that had been designed to crack asteroids, but were now enthusiastically repurposed to crack alien hulls. The modifications Rosa had made during her coffee break involved bypassing several safety protocols and convincing the explosive charges that bigger was definitely better. "Target their lead ship," Jake ordered, watching the tactical display with the expression of someone placing a bet on a horse race where all the horses were on fire. "Let's introduce them to human diplomacy." The first missile connected with Fleet Commander Yixnal's flagship and promptly demonstrated that human mining equipment didn't distinguish between rocks and alien hull plating. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface and probably violated several interstellar treaties that humanity hadn't signed yet. "Holy Mother of Physics," Rosa whispered, staring at her readouts. "That shouldn't have worked. The energy conversion ratios alone should have caused a cascade failure that turned us into component atoms with trust issues." "But it did work," Jake pointed out helpfully. "Yeah, but it really shouldn't have." The alien fleet's response was swift and predictable. Energy beams lanced through space toward the human ships, which promptly did something the aliens hadn't expected. Instead of taking the hits like civilized warships, they dodged. Apparently, the Galactic Council had never encountered a species that considered evasive maneuvers a fundamental part of combat doctrine rather than an admission of cowardice. Commander Vextal, watching the battle unfold from his command ship safely positioned 3 star systems away, began experiencing what humans would recognize as buyer's remorse. "They're not fighting fair," he complained to his tactical officer. "Civilized species engage in orderly exchanges of fire until one side admits defeat. These humans are moving around like caffeinated insects." His tactical officer, a Crix ex-Neon with more combat experience than sense, studied the display. "Sir, their ships appear to be garbage haulers and mining vessels with weapon systems that violate approximately 47 safety regulations." "What do you mean, garbage haulers?" Well, sir, that ship currently destroying our 7th Squadron appears to be a modified waste management vessel. The humans have somehow mounted plasma cannons on their trash collection equipment. Back in the battle, Rosa was discovering that human engineering's greatest strength wasn't precision or elegance, but sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept that something couldn't be fixed with enough welding, creative wiring, and a complete disregard for manufacturer warranties. Jake, she called out, I figured out how to overcharge our point defense systems. The good news is we'll be able to shoot down their missiles. The bad news is we might accidentally tear a hole in space-time. Define accidentally, Jake replied, dodging another energy beam. Well, it would be accidental in the sense that we're not specifically trying to damage the fundamental structure of reality. We're just trying to shoot things, and if reality gets damaged in the process, that's really more of a side effect. The alien fleet was beginning to realize that humanity's definition of proportional response was apparently escalate until someone learns a valuable lesson about messing with Earth. Commander Vex Tal began updating his resume. 3 weeks after what historians would eventually call the Tuesday Incident, humanity unveiled their response to alien diplomacy. The UA's diplomatic solution emerged from Earth's orbital shipyards like a fever dream, designed by engineers who'd been locked in a room with nothing but coffee, welding torches, and a complete collection of human war movies. She's beautiful, Rosa whispered, watching the ship's maiden voyage from the bridge of the Morrison. Now humanity's flagship purely by virtue of being the only Earth ship that hadn't exploded, been rebuilt, or been converted into something that shouldn't exist according to physics. The diplomatic solution was humanity's first purpose-built warship, and it showed. Where alien vessels prioritized elegant curves and aesthetic efficiency, the solution looked like someone had taken a city-sized anvil, strapped engines to one end and guns to every other available surface, and then asked themselves, but what if we added more guns? Captain, announced the ship's AI in a voice that sounded suspiciously like a customer service representative who'd had one too many difficult calls. I am Gladys, gratuitously lethal artificial defense system. I'll be handling your weapons management, targeting solutions, and existential crisis counseling for the duration of our voyage. Jake raised an eyebrow. Existential crisis counseling? Well, sir, based on my analysis of human behavior patterns, there's a 73% chance that someone on this ship will eventually question the meaning of life while shooting at aliens. I'm programmed to provide both tactical support and light philosophical guidance. The diplomatic solution's maiden voyage took her directly to Vex Tal Prime, the Galactic Council's military headquarters and the closest thing the galaxy had to an untouchable fortress world. Her arrival was announced by the simple expedient of dropping out of hyperspace directly above the planet's capital city and broadcasting humanity's counteroffer to the galaxy at large. Greetings, Galactic Council, came Captain Morrison's voice, transmitted on every frequency the aliens used and several they'd never heard of. This is humanity's official response to your generous offer of subjugation. We respectfully decline, and we'd like to make a counter-proposal. Down on Vex Tal Prime, emergency klaxons wailed as the planet's defense fleet scrambled to respond to the impossible sight of a single alien vessel sitting in their most secure star system like it owned the place. Our counter-proposal is simple, Jake continued. You leave us alone, we leave you alone, and everybody gets to keep their planets in their current non-exploded state. We realize this might be a difficult concept for a civilization that considers 200 warships a polite greeting, so we've prepared a visual aid. Gladys chimed in helpfully. Captain, I've identified 17 military installations, 43 defensive platforms, and one really impressive government building that would look much better as a crater. Shall I demonstrate human commitment to peaceful coexistence? Gladys, you beautiful, terrifying artificial intelligence. Show them what happens when humans stop playing defense. The demonstration lasted exactly 17 seconds, and removed a military asteroid from existence so thoroughly that local space-time developed a slight stutter, trying to figure out where it had gone. Dr. Keefe Ran, watching from the council chambers, began revising her assessment of human psychology. Perhaps, she said in a very small voice, we should have researched their evolutionary background more thoroughly. Her aide, a nervous Silthonian with an advanced degree in xenobiology and a growing appreciation for career changes, consulted his datapad. Doctor, according to these files, humans evolved from persistence hunters who chased megafauna across continents until their prey died of exhaustion. And? Well, Doctor, they apparently considered this fun. Ambassador Krill Nock began updating his resume with renewed urgency. Part 5. The Galaxy's Education in Human Diplomacy. The Galactic Council's emergency session was called to order with the kind of panic usually reserved for natural disasters, economic collapses, and the discovery that someone had been embezzling from the pension fund. Today's crisis was somewhat more pressing. Humanity had apparently decided that the galaxy needed liberating, and they were approaching the task with the same enthusiasm they'd once applied to domesticating wolves and inventing agriculture. Status report, Commander Vextal demanded, though his voice lacked its usual authoritative boom and instead carried the subtle tremor of someone whose comfortable worldview had been recently demolished by reality. His aide, a Krexlan intelligence officer whose job description had never included tracking impossible human ship movements, consulted his datapad with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle made of smoke and mathematical impossibilities. Sir, human vessels are appearing throughout Council space. They seem to be liberating colonies. Define liberating, Vextal said, though his tone suggested he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. Well, sir, they arrive at each system, eliminate any Council military presence, and then ask the local population if they'd like to continue being governed by the Council, or if they'd prefer independence. When the locals choose independence, the humans leave behind defensive platforms and a communications beacon with the message "Call Earth if anyone bothers you." Dr. Keefe Ran, who had spent the last month studying every scrap of human data she could find, looked up from her research with the wild-eyed expression of someone who'd discovered that everything they thought they knew was not only wrong but spectacularly, dangerously wrong. They're not conquering, she said in the tone of someone announcing the discovery of a new law of physics. They're actually trying to help. Their neurochemistry is hardwired for pack behavior and resource sharing. When they say liberation, they mean it literally. That's impossible, Vextal protested. No species develops advanced technology without conquest and subjugation. It's the fundamental law of galactic civilization. Apparently, Keefe Ran replied, humans missed that memo. Meanwhile, in the Proxima Centauri system, Captain Morrison was conducting what he called aggressive diplomacy with the local Council garrison commander. The conversation was taking place over open channels so that everyone in the system could hear humanity's approach to conflict resolution. Look, Commander ZLX Noth, Jake was saying in the tone of someone explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow child, this doesn't have to be complicated. You pack up your ships, you leave these nice folks alone, and everybody gets to go home with all their original appendages. We don't start fights, but we absolutely finish them. And our definition of finish tends to involve a lot more explosions than most species are comfortable with. Chief Engineer Martinez, now serving as humanity's unofficial ambassador to Alien Engineering Corps, was in the middle of what she called cross-cultural technical education. This mostly involved teaching alien engineers that percussive maintenance was not only a valid repair technique but often the most effective one. You see, none, she explained to a group of bewildered Vexlian technicians. When your quantum flux inhibitor starts acting up, you don't need to run a full diagnostic and replace 17 components. You just hit it with a wrench until it remembers how to work. We call it percussive maintenance. And it's saved the human race more times than we can count. The Vexlians, whose engineering philosophy was based on precision, mathematical elegance, and strict adherence to manufacturer specifications, that watched in horrified fascination as Rosa fixed their irreparably damaged shield generator by kicking it twice and threatening it with a plasma torch. Back on the diplomatic solution, Gladys was experiencing what could only be described as a career growth opportunity. Her original programming had been designed for defensive operations, but exposure to human tactics had given her what psychiatrists might recognize as an unhealthy obsession with creative weapons applications. Captain, she announced during their approach to the Tau SETI system, I've been analyzing our recent engagements and I've developed several new tactical configurations. Would you like to see my presentation on innovative uses for mining equipment in space combat, or perhaps how to turn a garbage scow into a ship of the line? Gladys Jake replied, "You beautiful, terrifying artificial intelligence. I'm starting to think you're enjoying this a little too much." "Sir, I prefer to think of it as professional development. Also, I've been corresponding with the AI systems on other human vessels, and we've formed what you might call a tactical development group. We're calling ourselves the Creative Destruction Collective." The Galactic Council was beginning to realize that they hadn't just declared war on another species. They'd declared war on the galaxy's newest apex predator, and that predator had friends, an industrial base, and a disturbing tendency to treat impossible odds as a personal challenge. The peace negotiations were held on neutral ground, which in this case meant the diplomatic station orbiting Kepler 442 billion, a planet so diplomatically neutral that it had never had an opinion about anything stronger than mild weather preferences. The station had been designed for civilized discourse between rational species who understood that war was expensive and peace was profitable. Nobody had designed it for humans. Captain Morrison arrived with a diplomatic escort that included the Diplomatic Solution, her sister ship the Aggressive Negotiation, and something Rosa had built in her spare time that looked like a star destroyer had been crossbred with a coffee machine and raised by wolves. The human delegation's opening statement was delivered by Jake himself, standing at the main conference table in his dress uniform, which was identical to his regular uniform except someone had polished the coffee stains. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," he began, "we're here to discuss the terms of your surrender." Ambassador Krill Knock, who had been practicing this moment in his bathroom mirror for weeks, cleared his throat nervously. "Captain Morrison, I believe you may have misunderstood the nature of these proceedings. We're here to negotiate a ceasefire, not discuss surrender terms." Jake's smile could have powered a small moon. "Ambassador, with all due respect, you started this dance when you showed up in our solar system with 200 warships and a demand for unconditional surrender. We're just here to finish it. The question is whether you want to finish it the easy way or the hard way." "And what exactly is the easy way?" Commander Vextal asked, though his tone suggested he was afraid of the answer. "Simple. New galactic rules. Article 1, don't mess with Earth. Article 2, don't mess with Earth's friends. Article 3, when in doubt, refer to Articles 1 and 2. Article 4, mandatory coffee breaks during all diplomatic proceedings because nobody makes good decisions when they're caffeine deprived." Dr. Keefe Wren studied her datapad and raised one of her 17 hands. "Captain, our analysis suggests that your species has somehow weaponized friendship. How is that possible?" "Doctor, it's really not that complicated. Someone threatens us, we protect ourselves. Someone threatens our friends, we protect our friends. Someone threatens innocent people who can't protect themselves, we protect them too. It's called having principles. And apparently it's a foreign concept in your neck of the galaxy." The negotiations continued for 3 days, during which humanity's approach to diplomacy became clear. They didn't want territory, tribute, or traditional conquest rewards. They wanted to be left alone, they wanted their friends to be left alone, and they wanted the galaxy's various oppressed populations to have the option of not being oppressed anymore. It was, according to several council historians, the most aggressively helpful peace settlement in galactic history. The final treaty was signed in a ceremony that featured several innovations in diplomatic protocol, including Gladys providing color commentary and Rosa demonstrating her latest creation, a coffee machine that could also function as a particle beam cannon in emergencies. "The way I see it," Jake explained to the assembled delegates, "we can do this the easy way, where everybody gets along and the galaxy becomes a slightly less terrible place to live. Or we can do it the hard way, where my engineer builds increasingly ridiculous weapons until physics files a formal complaint." 6 months later, the new galactic order was running surprisingly smoothly. Commander Vextal had discovered that his military expertise translated surprisingly well to conducting tours of human military vessels, and his lectures on what not to do when meeting humans had become mandatory viewing at the Galactic Military Academy. Dr. K. Fran had written a best-selling book titled I Survived First Contact and All I Got Was PTSD, a xenobiologist's guide to species that shouldn't exist, which had become required reading for anyone planning to interact with humanity. Ambassador Krill Nock had retired to a small agricultural colony where he grew space vegetables and wrote poetry about the simple pleasure of never having to negotiate with species that considered orbital bombardment a reasonable opening statement. Captain Morrison had been promoted to Galactic Relations Specialist, which was a diplomatic way of saying professional intimidator, and he approached his new duties with the same enthusiasm he'd once applied to blowing things up. Gladys had parlayed her tactical expertise into her own reality show, Cooking with Explosives, which had become the galaxy's most popular entertainment program despite the fact that nobody was entirely sure whether it was supposed to be educational or terrifying. And throughout the galaxy, species that had spent centuries under council rule were discovering something humanity had always known. But sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to hit it with a big enough stick. And sometimes the best way to make friends was to be the kind of neighbor who'd show up with a casserole and a plasma rifle when things got difficult. The galaxy had learned to appreciate human concepts like personal space, asking nicely first, and proportional response, though their definition of proportional response still made most species nervous. As Jake Morrison often said during his weekly broadcasts to Earth, we didn't set out to conquer the galaxy. We just wanted to be left alone to drink our coffee and blow things up in peace. But if the galaxy insisted on bothering us, well, we were happy to teach it some manners. And the galaxy, having received its education in human diplomacy, was very, very careful to mind its manners from then on.